Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. And as usual, I'll remind you to join the mailing list as just in case YouTube cuts me off or takes me down for whatever reason. Who knows why they would do that, but they might do that. So that way I'll have a way to get in touch with you and show you or let you know where I'm posting these days. I'll probably continue to post on Rumble and BitChute and all of the other places that I usually post. As well, I have a very robust forum at canadapoly.com. We talk about a lot of stuff, including Canadian federal politics and Canadian provincial politics and general. I'll add some forums if people are interested in that, but there's lots of good conversations that happen, and it's pretty active. So I'm very happy with how much people are using it, especially these days where it feels like online you can't actually have a say without a moderator removing it. I try not to remove posts unless they're like shilling or being really ridiculous, or unless they're selling something that's doesn't make any sense to be on the platform. Anyway, come and check it out. It'd be lots of fun to have you there. One thing that I'll do a little PSA before we get into the news today. Often, I talk to a lot of very smart people, and sometimes I say things that they're like, hold on, say that again. Like, what do you mean about that? And yesterday I was talking about form sliding, and somebody didn't know about that. And I thought that the person, like, they're in a situation where they've been dealing with shills and all sorts of internet trolls, right? And I thought that they would know what form sliding is. And there's a whole bunch of techniques to use to slide a form. And all that really means is to take the form off topic from the original post. If the original post is very inflammatory, if it's too close to a truth, or if it's I don't know, whatever, something somebody wants the attention drawn away from, then you can slide that conversation away from that topic, and then all of a sudden you're talking about something else. And that's just one of the strategies. If you want to read about all of the strategies, or a lot of the strategies, such as consensus cracking and topic dilution and information collection, you can click on the archive link and check it out. But I'll read to you what form sliding is, just in case you notice it in your day-to-day Facebook travels. If you notice this, get out of the conversation, because it's not an honest conversation, okay? It's done by a bad actor, okay? Form sliding. Form sliding is the tactic that simply means to turn the direction of the post. This can include vote brigading, or it can include someone or many people logging into different accounts and distracting from the post itself. It is misdirection. In form sliding, a shill somehow sidetracks the main argument being made. This is the one that I've experienced most on Reddit. For example, I often make posts centered around the United States. A simple form sliding tactic would be to say that does not happen in Europe. This gets people away from the main idea of the post, and ultimately I'm arguing with somebody on items not even related to my post. It works, and it works really well, and it happens a lot on places like Twitter or places like Facebook, where you want to make a post and talk about X, and all of a sudden you're arguing Y, like the finer points of Y, with somebody you don't know, right? And the interesting part about that is two things. One, an engineer's job, like somebody who's making Facebook and whatever, they're web designers, engineers, their job is to keep your eyeballs on the app as long as possible. And two, conflict drives bringing people back. Conflict drives a return to the app. Conflict drives the opening of the app again to see if somebody's responded, and then you can tell them just how wrong they are, right? That's why I'm on Facebook, because it's a big waste of time. It's a big waste of time. I do this instead. I put together my points. Anyway, form sliding. If you want to talk about X and you find yourself arguing about Y, stop arguing about Y and just disengage. It's not worth it. And people who you know can be inhabited, like the Smith guy in The Matrix. You can believe something to a degree that you are a mouthpiece for that thing. You're not actually telling people what you think. You're telling people what you've been told to tell other people by the thing that you're a part of, right? Your group, right? It's a need. Actually, this archive link has a discussion about that, right? Have you ever heard about the elevator group think study? Essentially, a person would stand backwards on an elevator, and all who entered the elevator would also stand backwards. This is the psychology of conformity. Did you know every decision you make is essentially a committee act, right? And I often talk about this. We farm out our sanity to the people around us. That's how we maintain sanity. It's too much for our brains to process, so we ask other people, like, hey, this pretty in line with your reality too? Yeah, okay, cool. We're all in line with our realities, right? It's a very interesting way to do it. Very interesting way to solve the problem of maintaining sanity, and it's also easy to manipulate, right? Just be aware of the psychology of what's happening, right? It's very interesting. Okay, let's get into the news. I know it was a long intro. I apologize. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe that was worthwhile. I hope it was worthwhile. Senator Denise Batters getting into Miss Telford. Miss Telford was at committee yesterday and she was testifying. And so Senator Batters says the determined questioning of PMJT's Chief of Staff, Katie Telford, by Leona Alisov just made it crystal clear that it was Telford who made the decision not to tell Prime Minister Trudeau about the serious allegations against the CDS Vance. Breach of her Chief of Staff duties, COS duties. And here is the CTV News article. The CTV News article sanitizes this. The tweet says, well, this person says, Pulch says, everyone is lying. It's written all over their face. The Liberals are useless and are not doing their jobs. Taxpayers are paying for it. And CTV News, though, says, we did not know what the complaint was about, says Telford of Vance's allegation. The Prime Minister's Chief of Staff says she was given no information about a complaint levied at the former Defense Chief General Jonathan Vance in March 2018 and was told there was no safety issue at hand. Katie Telford is appearing before the House of Commons Defense Committee Friday as members seek to pin down who knew what and when about the allegation that was brought to light by former military ombudsman Gary Walbourne. She said the Defense Minister's office contacted her office after Walbourne reported the allegation to Defense Minister Harjit Sajjan seeking advice on where to direct it. In a conversation with the clerk of the Privy Council, PCO, he said that it was the PCO, not politicians, that should follow up, given it dealt with the governor in council appointment. Quote, as you've already heard, I was not given the substance or the details of the allegation, and as you have already heard, my office and the minister were not given the substance or the details of the allegation. We did not know what the complaint was about. This contradicts Walbourne's previous testimony and subsequent statements that he did in fact inform Sajjan it was a complaint of an inappropriate sexual behavior against the Chief of Defense. Quote, I talked to Elder, who asked the appropriate officials at PCO to ensure that no one's safety was at risk, and I was told that there was no safety issue, Telford said, reiterating that there were no details provided about the nature of the complaint or rumors to go off of. Scroll down a little bit. The Conservatives' opposition motion this week, which was ultimately defeated, called on Trudeau to fire his Chief of Staff for failing to inform him about the complaint. Speaking to reporters earlier in the day, leader Aaron O'Toole said he's glad to see someone in the Liberal corner step forward to be accountable on the issue. Canadians, I think it's funny that it's the only woman in the whole thing. She's responsible. That's the one. Thanks to you, feminist government, you. Anyway, back to this. Canadians deserve the truth. And what Ms. Telford will have to show today is, has Mr. Trudeau been truthful with Canadians with respect to what he's known over 3 years with regards to allegations against the former Chief of Defense Staff? Either he knew more than he's letting on, or Ms. Telford will have to explain to Canadians why she felt it appropriate to hide this critical information from the Prime Minister, said O'Toole on Friday. Somebody's responsible. We've got to get to the bottom of this, right? Military police launched an investigation into the Vance allegation in February of this year. Telford said it wasn't until March when media reports surfaced that the Prime Minister's office, including Trudeau, were made aware of the substance of the report. Asked repeatedly why she didn't tell Trudeau earlier about the complaint, she said she followed the advice she received from the PCO to keep it out of the hands of politicians and political staff. When we found out about the unusual circumstances that the minister found himself in, we immediately took it seriously. We immediately took action and the appropriate people who should follow up on it, she said. Interesting, right? And I read this tweet that basically said, this person feels everyone is lying. The body language says they're lying. I was looking for the actual testimony and I couldn't find it. It says, in testimony before committee, Telford repeatedly evades questions by CPC MP Leona Alisov, who made the decision not to tell the Prime Minister about a serious allegation against the Chief of Defense Staff. Translation, won't answer, unacceptable. So dodging answers, not answering. But we do know those Liberals, they don't answer questions they don't like, right? And it is unfortunate, but it is a truth that we've had to deal with since 2015 at the very, very earliest. Or no, at the very last time I checked. Katie Telford said Trudeau didn't know of sexual misconduct report against General Vance. It's such a nice, clean, easy way to wrap it all up. Did you know about this? Not details. Okay, all done. Next scandal. It's wild because, is this going to fly? The way they wrote the article, the way they wrote the CTV article, yep, I think it's going to fly. I think it's probably going to fly. And, how do you prove? If you had a smoking gun document, we'd have seen it by now. If we had a smoking gun, Katie Telford saying, XYZ, Me Too moment, blah, 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 blah. we'd see that, I think. Or either they've hidden it or gotten rid of it, or it never existed in the first place, the smoking gun document. So who knows who told who what when, and there's no way to prove it. So there was more on the SNC Lavalin scandal. I don't know that this is going to go anywhere. I mean, I realize that the military police are investigating Vance, but do you remember the Guyan Gomesi? Is that how you say that? It's terrible. I know I'm bad at saying his name. I apologize. There was somebody yesterday or the other day who was like, "Oh, I've watched you for years, and your slaughtering of names has driven me away." I was like, "Not the hour-long show." Anyway, I think it's funny the things that like people say they're getting. I think it's trolls. I can't imagine you've been watching me this long and now's the time you're going to get mad at me for names. Anyway, the Guyan Gomeshi thing, Jayan Gomeshi, whatever. Where all of these people were saying, "Oh yeah, this totally happened," and it was a big media circus, and then nothing happened. Nothing's gonna happen. Nothing's gonna happen. Katie Telford's not even gonna lose her job over this, I don't think. And why? Well, because she was told by somebody to keep it out of the hands of the politicians, so she did her work, right? It's like, man, Parks and Rec, when Ron's assistant, that female actress who became really, really powerful, made all of his appointments on March 31st because she thought March 31st didn't exist, right? Like, that should probably be a firing offense, but he was like, "Oh, you know, like, you're protecting us, right? So you get a buy, no problems. You did the job the right way, right? Like, even though wink, wink, nudge, nudge." It's wild. Talking or moving into the budget, Parliament's budget officer, PBO, slices and dices Freeland budget. This is a Goldstein piece from The Sun. Independent, nonpartisan parliamentary budget officer Yves Giroux dismantled finance minister and also reporter Chrystia Freeland's first budget on Wednesday with the skills of a math professor, marking a student's grade 8 arithmetic exam, claiming that the 2 + 2 = 5. He said the document she unveiled April 19th overestimated how much it will help Canada's economy recover from the COVID-19 recession, overstated the amount being spent on stimulus, and underestimated the deficits and debt it will generate for years to come. This means that any substantial new permanent spending would either lead to a higher debt to GDP ratio, more debt, or have to be financed through higher revenues, more taxes, and or spending reductions in other areas, fewer services, he said. Giroux noted that based on Trudeau's government's own figures, it appears Canada's labour market will return to pre-pandemic levels by the end of this fiscal year, meaning much of the money now being spent on economic stimulus may not be necessary and will in fact be too much spending for too long, too late. Yay! They've got it wrong, and they've got it terribly wrong, and we're hurtling on this train of disaster, or towards disaster, with no brakes. And they're not even thinking about the brakes. They're thinking, how can we increase the speed, do you think? Could we shovel some more coal on there? It seems pretty full, but we could try. Will that make it go faster? Canada's unemployment rate rose to 8.1% in April. I think it was in March, the economy outpaced expectations, adding 303,000 jobs as restrictions rolled back. And then in April, I think only 200,000 jobs. I read this yesterday, but I can't remember. Hold on. Yeah, it lost 207,000 jobs. Canada's labour market lost 207,000 jobs last month as a spike in COVID-19 variant led to renewed public health restrictions. So yeah, that's not good. And I'm going to talk about lockdowns a little bit later, but Doug Ford was supposed to announce an extension of the current lockdown to June 2nd. Yesterday, it was supposed to be announced officially. I don't know to June 2nd, but it was supposed to be announced another month, and then nothing got announced. And then they said no golf until after June 2nd. We'll get to that in a minute. But I think that is interesting. Could these job numbers be worse than they expected? Could the economy actually be catching up with these disastrous policies? Like, I don't know. I don't know if there's a breaking point at this point. I think the wheels are off, and we're heading towards we're heading towards something that is in Newfoundland's new plan to reimagine the future, the Big Reset, right? The report on the report of the Premier's Economic Recovery Team, executive summary, May 21. Yikes, that's not so good. That's not so good. So, like I said, right, it doesn't seem like there's anything that's going to dissuade our leadership from this track that we're on, right? This official document track that we're on. But it seems they may have lost their nerve a little bit. They backed down on announcing it yesterday or today, it seems, as well. So I don't know what that means. I honestly don't know what that means. I can't even speculate. Let's get into a little bit of speech I think this is interesting. I think it's notable. Yesterday, I talked about how YouTube is already soft censoring Canadian content, even though C10 calls for a centering of Canadian content. My content has been further restricted and put in front of less eyeballs lately, I guess. And that, I mean, again, it's fine. It doesn't bother me. I'm not doing this for fame or anything like that. That's not the point. The point is to do this, but I think that it's notable. The whole reason that I've got monetization on YouTube is to see what they'll demonetize and to try and play that, to play that balance, right? To see what that balance even is, because it's hard to discern because the rules aren't very clear. And well, I'll tell you in just a second, like PayPal is now enacting blacklisting of Rebel News. I found out on Canada Land of all places, and so that's interesting. And it's not that we didn't see this coming, and it's not that our politicians haven't made statements about this in the past that were directly contradictory to what their actions are now. Right? So here's Michael Geist. In May 2019, Trudeau said internet regulation could be used to repress citizens' free speech. In 2021, he says, hold my beer. In 2021, Canadian government seeks to become global outlier in how it regulates user-generated content on the internet. Right, like one of the most draconian lockdowns of the internet in the world, aside from like mainland China, right? Like, and that's wild, not unexpected, but wild. PayPal's getting right in on it. They're loving it, right? Here's Canada Land. Ezra Levent says Rebel has been cut off by PayPal and that they're now bleeding heavily and it could actually destroy them. And here's the screenshot from PayPal, Ezra Levent, that Canada Land's sharing. They're now looking to raise $150,000 to sue PayPal to set a legal precedent that no tech company can simply decide to destroy your life one Friday night because they don't like your opinions. And that's a quote from Ezra. I didn't scrub through and find it, but it's wild. I was looking through Ezra's Twitter feed and I got distracted. I was looking for Ezra to talk to weigh in on this as well. So I apologize that I don't have it. I got off on a tangent and didn't get back to this tab before I did my show. So moving on, I'm sure Ezra Levent talked about it. I'm sure he did an entire show about it. I think it's scary. I think it's scary what they're doing to creators. In one breath, they're saying we have to prioritize Canadian media and prioritize Canadian stories, and in the next, they're cutting off the only independent journalist, or one of the biggest independent journalists in Canada, right? And I mean, if you don't think that that's chilling, why would I build a business doing this, right? Like it's one of those things that you get to build. If you get to build a house, and you get to build it anywhere in the world, right? Would you build it on a precarious cliff where the ocean is like washing over the cliff? Like, I can build a house anywhere I want. And I walk up to this beautiful looking, it's a wonderful surrounding and all sorts of other stuff. And I see the Rebel House being like engulfed in a wave, right? And I think to myself, should I continue building my house here? Right? It's an interesting thing. I could build a website doing anything. I could comment on, I could just mine keywords and make way more money than I make now. Just making little 5-minute explainer videos on like how to do X, Y, Z, right? And put it up on my website. That'd be that. Easy. But I do this because I like doing this, because I'm interested in this. And I think that this is important. And what they're doing is through their hand in glove, and I'm talking about the government, partnership or strong arming or having conversations with the tech giants. They are using push and nudge and psychological mechanisms to shut down dissent. And they're doing it on purpose. It is planned. It is meditated. It is thought out. It is done with precision. I don't know what to tell you. I'm not going to stop doing this. I'm just saying that it's difficult. It's difficult to justify. It's difficult to justify even Rebel. Like, the fight is constant. Like, you can't report the news because you might get into trouble. I can't speak half my show on YouTube. We have to go to the redacted version because YouTube will just cut off my show, and then that's that, right? And that's wild. That's an interesting, wild place to be, right? I'm no Tim Pool, but if my show gets cut off, then that's my whole back catalog just poof, gone, right? I mean, I've got it on a hard drive. I can upload it to Rumble, I guess, and it's backed up on Library. It's backed up on Odysee. I'm not meaning to diatribe, but they're trying to stop people talking about truth, and they're using all sorts of different tactics to get it done without formalizing it. And even though they are trying to formalize it, they're already moving to chill the free speech of Canadians, and that's terrifying. That's frightening. You should be aware of it. Here's a Globe and Mail article moving into pandemic mismanagement. Here's a Globe and Mail article talking about pandemic errors made Canadian COVID-19 outbreak far worse than it needed to be, committee told. Yeah, yep, could have told you that. Poor intelligence gathering on COVID-19, faulty risk assessments on the spread of the virus, and a public health agency that lacked enough scientific expertise all helped make the pandemic worse in Canada than it should have been, a parliamentary committee heard Friday. During several hours of testimony that was critical of the federal government's response to the outbreak, experts in national security, public health, and medicine said many of the problems with Canada's pandemic response were avoidable. And those lessons can't be ignored as the government tries to distill the lessons from COVID-19 in hopes of preparing the country for a future health threat. I think the number one thing we can do to make sure that the country doesn't repeat the mistakes of the last time is get rid of the incompetent leadership that is at every level in the government. Get rid of them all. Vote them all out. Every single incompetent one of them. How awful. What a terrible response. What a terrible response. This came across my news feed and I thought, this is just sad. I'm sorry that we live here. I'm sorry that we did this to everyone because we did this, right? Like, our inactions have led to this ridiculousness. This is just incredible. The hug glove, a hug can have a positive impact. Ontario family working to bring hug glove to isolated Canadians. Just go and hug people. It's okay. That's enough for YouTube. Demonetized, done. But this is just sad. It's very, very sad. Hug glove? How does this help? How does this help humanize people? It does not help. This is another mismanagement thing. This is another misstep of the management of this this pandemic, this ongoing atrocity, this ongoing catastrophe that's happening, right? That's what's happening here. Okay, the National Airlines Council of Canada says it's time for the federal government to work with the industry in Canada to develop a similar restart plan to the UK's, right? So Air Canada's done waiting around. I have a few friends who are pilots, and I was talking to one of them yesterday, day before, and I said, it's wild that like the airline industry isn't worried at all about tourism that's been shut down for a year, like gone. Tourism industry, off, turned off completely. I haven't heard people screaming and yelling about that. Air Canada was like on a razor's edge. Well, no, they weren't. They were buying Air Transat, and then I think that went through, but I'm not sure. But it was like there was a few years there where being an airline pilot was kind of lean and it wasn't a really good viable job, and then it was a really great job. Like there was just a few years where it was seen as not so great, right? But then it was seen as a job where you didn't get paid a lot of money, but it had a lot of great perks, right? Like being an airline pilot. And now it seems like the airline industry just turned off and accepted it from the government. Like, hey, we need you to shut down for, I can't imagine they were saying 30 days at a time. Like, yeah, another 30 days, thanks. Because you'd hear screaming every 30 days. So I don't know what the agreement looks like, but it looks like the agreement's done now, right? And you can't replace an economy with government handouts and loans, right? You have to wonder what these airline industries got to stay silent so long, right? So anyway, they're demanding a return. I think this is interesting. Airline industry group urges Canada to follow UK's lead plan. Oh, this is the article, sorry. An industry group is calling on Ottawa to follow the United Kingdom's lead and help bring a restart plan for Canada's airline sector. Mike Naney, I've got that wrong, sorry. There's no G in there. President and Chief Executive Officer of the National Airlines Council of Canada said the UK has announced that starting May 17th, it will allow travel to and from a select list of countries. He says travelers from those destinations will not need to quarantine upon entering the UK. McNaney said that the initial list of countries announced Friday will expand over time as the public health situation improves. So that's interesting. I read yesterday as well that Turkish Airlines is encouraging British holiday travelers with like no PCR test, just come and then you can go back and quarantine. I thought that was interesting. So they're trying to get the European, like eat the European destinations lunch a little bit there. And Canada fails to make UK's new green list of safe summer travel destinations. Our travel industry, our tourism industry is decimated, right? Decimated, completely decimated. And it doesn't seem like there's a lot of people who are all that upset about it. It seems very strange. Like the people who usually work in the tourism industry, the people who work at like Canada's Wonderland, what happened to them, right? Like, can they open? It's outside. Why not? So it seems very strange that, from airlines to small tourist attractions to even medium-sized tourist attractions, like who knows, like Niagara Falls, right? Like, there's a lot of money that is expected that goes into the city, that goes into the city coffers, even just a regular city. Like, what has happened to all of that revenue? How does that get returned? Property tax increases? Do we grow into it? What's the plan? Nobody seems to be talking about a plan ever. Nobody's got a plan at all. That's a problem. Okay, racism. Let's talk about racism. Good news, everyone, says Roseanne Archibald, Ontario Regional Chief of who? Let's see. She, her. Oh, I don't know what she's the chief of. Nina Sakamon. So she's a First Nation chief, I guess, according to her Twitter bio. And she says she's pleased to announce the vaccine dosing interval for urban Indigenous in Ontario has been reversed to the original 21 to 28 day schedule as recommended by the manufacturers. I'm grateful to many other advocates and supporters who recognize the need to protect the vulnerable. So Indigenous people in Ontario, I guess, get the dosing at the 21 to 28 dosing schedule. So that's important for some people and not important for other people. Science, right? So that's the science is updating so fast these days. It's almost like you can make it say whatever you want, right? It's just, one day and the next. Here's Jagmeet Singh, and he's saying that it is racist. NDP Jagmeet Singh says says lack of vaccines for Brampton, clear systemic discrimination. Okay, but we're prioritizing First Nations people for vaccination. So isn't that not systemic racism? The Walt Disney Corporation claims that America was founded on systemic racism, encourages employees to complete white privilege checklists, and separates minorities into racially segregated affinity groups. Christopher Rufo has obtained internal documents that will shock you. And these are kind of linked here in the Twitter stuff going through all this. This is a wild, wild ride. This is an interesting situation, being told that you're racist all the time, being told that no matter what you do, it's racist, whether you provide dosing on the correct schedule for a certain racial group, or whether you provide no vaccines for a certain racial group because they're a racial group, right? Which racial group doesn't get any vaccines? Anybody? No? Okay. Are there any racial groups that are removed from being eligible because of their race? I honestly don't know. I don't know. It's Canada these days, because there could be. Who knows, right? I honestly, at this point, nothing would surprise me. To have something like that explicit in writing would not shock me. And it would shock me if it was, I'll not get into that because we're not on redacted yet. But it is an incredible situation to blame everything on racism. And that is what's happening. And it's not honest. It is pushing a narrative. It's not saying, here's a problem that is based in racism, and here is a pathway to fixing it. This is a problem that needs to be addressed, and this is how we could address this specific instance of racism. What's happening is everything's racist. If you then, in turn, respond to Mr. Singh's criticism and provide these vaccines, then it's going to be racist to somebody else, right? The reason that the vaccines aren't available to somebody else is racist, right? And it's a never-ending red herring, because it doesn't ever actually fix anything. It's not valid. It's not a valid vector to make an impassioned plea, right? Like it doesn't lead to better outcomes. All it leads to is division. And that's the point. And I think that it's interesting that the NDP is trying to make political hay out of this gleefully. It's so wild. It's so wild to live through, right? It's so wild to live through. Okay, we're going to go over to the redacted part of the show, and I will talk about things that YouTube doesn't like. I've already talked about things that YouTube doesn't like, but it's one of those things. It is what it is. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. Head over to Rumble, Odysee, or BitChute to watch the rest of the show, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.